In the heart of the bustling space station, where diverse alien races mingled, a small human boy wandered, unaware of the tragic destiny awaiting him. The station promenade gleamed with vibrant lights and endless rows of shops, cafes, and entertainment centers. People moved about their business, a mix of various species, all coexisting in this hub of galactic life. Yet, beneath the surface, tensions simmered between humans and the Lions, a proud and arrogant alien race. It was here, in the middle of this lively crowd, that the unthinkable happened. The lion noble, Linux, towered over the boy, his cold eyes narrowing in disdain. His long, taloned fingers wrapped around the child's throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The boy's small hands grasped at the lion's wrist, his legs kicking helplessly as he struggled to breathe. Linux didn't care. To him, this child was nothing more than a weak, fragile human, a pest that dared to exist in his presence. Without a word, Linux squeezed tighter. The boy's face turned red, his eyes wide with fear. The people around them froze, horrified by the spectacle, but too afraid to intervene. Linux, a high-ranking official, was untouchable. In this part of the galaxy, his authority was absolute. With a sickening crunch, the lion snapped the boy's spine, tossing his lifeless body to the ground like discarded trash. Gasps of horror echoed through the crowd. Security cameras caught every angle, capturing the gruesome act for the entire galaxy to witness. Linux, unfazed, wiped his hands as if ridding himself of dirt and walked away, his long cloak billowing behind him. He didn't even glance back at the broken body he had left behind. Marcus Gray, the boy's father, stood frozen in shock. A human diplomat on a critical mission, he had been negotiating peace treaties, never imagining this would be the day he lost his son. Trembling with grief and rage, Marcus confronted the lion. "You'll pay for this," Marcus hissed through clenched teeth. "You murdered my son." Linux didn't even bother to stop. He turned slightly, looking at Marcus with a sneer. "Humans are beneath me. Your son's life was worth less than nothing." In a fit of uncontrollable rage, Marcus lunged at Linux, striking him squarely in the face. The crack of the diplomat's fist against the lion's nose reverberated through the air. Linux stumbled, momentarily surprised by the force of the blow. But before Marcus could press his advantage, Linux's guards swarmed him, beating him to the ground. Barely conscious, Marcus was thrown into an escape shuttle, his body battered and broken, but his mind burning with vengeance. He had lost everything, but there was one hope left, a desperate, last chance for justice. Before passing out, Marcus managed to send a coded message to his brother, Philip. The cold hum of the cryo vault reverberated through the facility, the air thick with the sterile chill of frozen time. Jack Briggs stood at the control panel, his hands hovering over the activation sequence. The lights flickered overhead, as if the ancient systems themselves were waking up from a long-forgotten slumber. Jack took a deep breath, knowing what he was about to unleash. The frozen soldiers before him were not just men and women. They were weapons, humanity's last hope against the galactic empire that had slaughtered their kin. Philip Gray watched silently from the shadows, the weight of his mission pressing down on him. His brother Marcus had sent a message, a desperate plea for help, just before vanishing into the abyss of space. And now, his only hope rested in the hands of these frozen warriors, relics of a time when humanity was willing to push the limits of ethical science to survive. Jack's finger hovered over the activation button. "Once we do this, there's no going back," he muttered. Philip didn't reply. His silence was the answer. With a click, the vault rolled to life. The lights brightened, and the hum grew louder, filling the room with a deep, resonant vibration. The cryo chambers released a sharp hiss as the frost-covered doors slid open. One by one, the soldiers of Majestic 12 emerged, their bodies stiff and pale, eyes blinking against the harsh light. They were more than human, genetically modified, enhanced in every possible way to become perfect instruments of war. Captain Ichiro Roto, was the first to step forward. His eyes, sharp and calculating, scanned the room as though he had just woken from a brief nap rather than a decades-long sleep. How long? His voice was steady, no hint of the disorientation that should have accompanied such a long period in stasis. Too long, Jack replied, handing him a uniform. The galaxy's changed, but not for the better. We're needed again. Roto nodded, his stoic expression unchanging. The rest of Majestic 12 stirred to life behind him. Sergeant Alara Vasquez, Corporal Lena Okafor, Corporal Grayson Wolfe, all legends in their own right, each with a reputation for feats of strength, speed, and skill that had once struck fear into the heart of their enemies. Together, they were humanity's deadliest force. Philip felt a surge of hope as he watched them awaken, their presence a testament to human ingenuity and strength. These were the ones who had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer and survived. If anyone could stop the Lion Empire, it was Majestic 12. Jack pulled up a holographic display of the galactic map, a red dot pulsating near the galactic core. This is where Marcus was last seen, an arbiter station. He was on a diplomatic mission to negotiate with a new species, one that claimed to have information critical to Earth's survival. Alara frowned as she examined the display. The arbiters? Aren't they the ones who keep the peace between species? What's their stake in this? That's what Marcus was trying to find out, Jack said, but he never came back. Ichiro folded his arms, his mind already calculating. The Lion Empire won't let us get close. They've probably got that station locked down by now. Which is why we need to hit them where it hurts first, Jack replied, his eyes dark with determination. We need to send a message, make them think twice before coming after us. Alara smirked, her hand brushing the hilt of the plasma knife strapped to her leg. I like the sound of that. Philip stepped forward, his voice low but firm. This isn't just about revenge. My brother's out there, and he has information that could save Earth. We need to find him before it's too late. Jack placed a hand on Philip's shoulder. We will. But first, we need to remind the galaxy who they're dealing with. The cold metal halls of the Epsilon Eridani fleet yards stretched out like a labyrinth, the hum of construction echoing in the distance. Majestic 12 moved silently through the shadows, their mag boots barely making a sound as they approached the central dry dock. There, waiting like a predatory beast ready to strike, was the experimental frigate they had come for. Jack grinned as he gazed at the sleek, angular ship. This is it, boys and girls. Our ticket to freedom. Alara let out a low whistle. I've seen some advanced tech in my time, but this is something else. Courtesy of the Titan expedition, Jack said, pride in his voice. Found some old alien ruins, reverse-engineered the tech. What you're looking at is humanity's best-kept secret. Ichiro raised an eyebrow. And they just left it sitting here for us to take. Let's just say we've got some friends in high places, Jack replied cryptically as he motioned for them to move toward the frigate. Philip felt a surge of adrenaline as they boarded the ship. The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the silent corridors. The ship felt alive, thrumming with energy beneath their feet, as if it was just waiting to be unleashed. As they reached the bridge, the AI interface blinked to life. Unknown personnel detected. Please identify. Jack's fingers flew across the console, inputting a series of codes. Authorization confirmed. Welcome aboard, Captain Briggs. The AI's melodic voice responded, all systems operational, awaiting orders. Jack grinned. Time to give the galaxy a wake-up call. The Lion cruisers appeared on the sensors just as the frigate powered up, 3 hulking warships bristling with weapons. Their commander's voice crackled over the comm. Human vessel, you are trespassing in Lion-controlled space. Surrender or be destroyed. Philip's hands itched toward the weapons console, but Jack shook his head. Not yet. Let them make the first move. The Lion ships fired, lances of energy streaking toward the frigate. The shields flared but held, absorbing the brunt of the attack. "Now," Jack said, his voice calm. With a flick of his wrist, the frigate's AI activated its weapons systems. The ship hummed with power as plasma cannons and railguns locked onto their targets. In a single devastating volley, the frigate fired, tearing through the Lion cruisers like paper. The enemy ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light, their debris scattering across the void. "That's for Henry," Philip muttered under his breath. Jack turned to the rest of the crew, his expression grim. This was just the beginning. The Lion Empire won't take this lying down. But we're not backing down either. We're taking the fight to them. Alara grinned, her eyes alight with excitement. "Let's show them what Majestic 12 can do." As the frigate surged forward into the darkness, Philip couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. For the first time since his nephew's death, the scales had tipped in humanity's favor. But deep down, he knew the true battle was yet to come. The Lions wouldn't stop until every last human was crushed beneath their heel, and Majestic 12 wouldn't stop until they had turned the tide of war. The sleek frigate sliced through the cold void of space, its engines humming with a quiet, lethal power. The ship's black hull absorbed the starlight, making it a shadow against the vast canvas of the galaxy. Inside, the crew of Majestic 12 prepared for the next phase of their mission, each of them honed by decades of war and survival. This was the fight they were born for. Captain Ichiro Roto stood at the bridge, his sharp eyes scanning the readouts on the holo display. The ship's AI was running simulations, plotting jump coordinates, and calculating probabilities with relentless precision. Next to him, Jack Briggs leaned against the console, arms folded, his expression distant as if already planning their next move. "How long until we reach the Arbiter station?" Philip Gray asked, his voice cutting through the silence. The A's melodic voice replied, "We are approximately 6 hours from the jump point. After that, it will be another 12 hours to reach the Arbiter station in the Acheon cluster." Philip nodded. Time was slipping through his fingers, each minute taking his brother further from safety. Marcus had always been the stronger one, the diplomat, the man who believed in peace when all Philip had known was war. It was ironic that Marcus, the one who thought violence could be avoided, now needed rescuing from the same galaxy it had torn them apart. Ichiro turned from the display, his calm demeanor unshaken. "We'll get him back. But don't let emotion cloud your judgment, Philip. This mission is bigger than any one person." "I know," Philip replied, though the weight of his brother's absence tugged at his thoughts. Alara Vasquez entered the bridge, her footsteps light but purposeful. She was adjusting her gauntlet, checking the charge on her plasma blades, always one to keep busy before a fight. "We're going into Arbiter territory, Haven't dealt with them in a while." "They're peacekeepers, not soldiers," Jack said. "We shouldn't have to worry about them unless the Lions are there too." Alara smirked, her eyes glinting with a mix of anticipation and mischief. "Peacekeepers can bleed just like soldiers." Ichiro shot her a warning glance, but the corner of his mouth twitched in amusement. "Let's try to keep this clean, Vasquez. We're not here to start a war with the Arbiters." "We're not," she agreed, "but the Lions might not give us that choice." Philip listened to the banter, his eyes focused on the swirling stars outside the viewport. Somewhere out there, his brother was trapped, and every passing second gnawed at his resolve. He couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. The Arbiters were supposed to be neutral, the galaxy's mediators, but if Marcus had gone missing under their watch, something was terribly wrong. 6 hours later, the frigate dropped out of hyperspace near the jump point, the stars elongating briefly before settling into their normal patterns. The crew gathered in the command center, tension thick in the air as the ship prepared for its next move. "The Acheon cluster," Jack said, pulling up a three-dimensional map of the region. "It's deep in Arbiter-controlled space. Normally, we wouldn't be able to get close without setting off every alarm in the sector, but this ship has some tricks up its sleeve." "Tricks like what?" Grayson Wolf, the team's tech expert, asked from his station. Jack grinned. "A stealth mode," based on alien tech, makes us invisible to most sensors for short bursts, but it's not foolproof, and it won't last long. How long? Ichiro asked, his voice all business. 10 minutes, give or take, Jack replied. Long enough to get in and out if we move fast. Alara raised an eyebrow. And if we don't? Then we'll be swarmed by arbiter drones and Leyan warships before we even make it to the station, Jack said, his tone suddenly serious. The room fell silent, the gravity of the situation sinking in. They were about to infiltrate one of the most secure facilities in the galaxy, and failure wasn't an option. Philip broke the silence. What's our plan once we're inside? Ichiro stepped forward, his commanding presence filling the room. We split into 2 teams. Jack and Grayson will stay on the ship and monitor communications. Alara, Philip, and I will go in. We need to find Marcus and extract him as quickly as possible. If the Leyans are involved, we'll deal with them, but our priority is getting Marcus out. Alara's grin returned. Finally, some action. Jack crossed his arms. Just remember, we're on a tight clock. We can't afford to get bogged down in a firefight. Understood, Ichiro said. Let's move out. The frigate slipped through the cold, dark expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it approached the Arbiter station. The station itself was a massive structure, a floating city of steel and glass that glittered in the starlight. It was shaped like a vast, rotating ring, with smaller structures jutting out from the central core. The Arbiter symbol, a stylized star encircled by a shield, was emblazoned on its hull, a reminder of their authority over the region. We're entering stealth mode, Jack said, his fingers dancing over the controls. The ship's lights dimmed, and the hum of the engines became almost imperceptible. On the sensors, the station loomed closer, but to the Arbiter systems, the frigate was invisible. We've got 10 minutes, Jack reminded them as the boarding ramp extended toward one of the station's maintenance hatches. Alara, Ichiro, and Philip suited up, their weapons secured and ready. Alara tapped her helmet, testing the comms. Ready for some fun. Stay focused, Ichiro warned as the airlock hissed open. They slipped out, moving with practiced precision as they entered the station's maintenance corridor. The walls were cold and sterile, the faint hum of the station's life support systems the only sound. Jack, we're in, Ichiro whispered. Monitor our movements and keep us updated. Copy that, Jack's voice crackled in their earpieces. I've got your position locked. Looks like the main hangar is to your left. If Marcus is here, that's where they'd likely have him. Let's move, Ichiro ordered. They advanced through the corridors, their steps silent, weapons drawn but lowered. Philip's heart raced as they moved deeper into the station. His mind flashed to his brother, wondering if he was locked in some cell or worse, already beyond saving. But he couldn't afford to think that way, not now. As they neared the hangar, the sound of voices echoed down the hall. They pressed themselves against the wall, listening. It's the Leyans, Philip whispered, his pulse quickening. They're here. Ichiro nodded, his eyes hard. We proceed with caution. No unnecessary engagements. They crept forward, reaching the edge of the hangar. Philip's breath caught in his throat as he saw what lay beyond the doors. Leyan soldiers were scattered throughout the massive chamber, their sleek, armored forms towering over the human captives who were huddled in a corner. Marcus was among them, his face bruised and bloodied but alive. We found him, Philip whispered, relief flooding his voice. Ichiro scanned the scene, assessing the situation. Too many guards. We need a distraction. Alara's eyes lit up with an idea. I've got just the thing. She pulled a small device from her belt, a remote EMP grenade. This should take out their systems for a few minutes. Enough time to get in and get out. Ichiro nodded. Do it. Activated the grenade, tossing it toward the far end of the hangar. It clattered to the ground, unnoticed by the Leyans, before emitting a low hum. A second later, the lights flickered and went dark, plunging the hangar into chaos. "Go," Ichiro ordered. They moved swiftly, slipping into the hangar under the cover of darkness. The scramble to restore power, their systems down, leaving them vulnerable. Philip reached Marcus first, cutting through his restraints with a plasma knife. "Not yet," Philip said, pulling his brother to his feet. "We're getting you out of here." The power surged back on, and they regained their bearings, their weapons snapping to life. But it was too late. Majestic 12 was already on the move, cutting through the soldiers with ruthless efficiency. "Jack, we've got Marcus," Ichiro said through the "prep for extraction." "Roger that," Jack replied. "Get to the airlock, and I'll bring the ship in." With Marcus in tow, they fought their way back through the station, plasma bolts flying past them as they weaved through the corridors. Philip shielded his brother as they ran, his only focus on getting Marcus out alive. The airlock hissed open, and the frigate hovered just outside, its boarding ramp extended. They sprinted aboard, covering their retreat with a barrage of fire. "Go, go, go," Jack shouted from the bridge as the ship's engines roared to life. The frigate shot away from the station, leaving the scrambling in their wake. They had done it. They had rescued Marcus. But as the station faded into the distance, Philip couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. Something darker was coming, and they were running out of time to stop it. Majestic 12 hurtled through space, the Arbiter station shrinking behind them as they fled towards safety. The crew gathered in the med bay, where Marcus lay on a medical cot, his injuries being tended to by Grayson. His face was bruised, and his left arm hung in a makeshift sling, but he was conscious and alive, more than Philip had dared to hope for. Marcus winced as Grayson applied a healing salve to a gash on his forehead. "That's a hell of a rescue," he said through gritted teeth. His voice was ragged, but still carried the same quiet resolve Philip remembered. "Had to come in hot," quipped, leaning against the bulkhead with her arms crossed. "But hey, we got you out. That's what counts." Philip stood at the foot of the cot, his mind still spinning from the chaos of the extraction. He hadn't seen his brother in years, not since Marcus had taken a diplomatic post with the Arbiters. They had been worlds apart, literally, and now here they were again, pulled into the same maelstrom of galactic conflict. "Marcus, what happened?" Philip asked, his voice low. "Why were you there? And why were they involved?" Marcus winced again as Grayson finished patching him up. Then he slowly sat up, his eyes dark with exhaustion and something else. Fear. "It's complicated," he began. "The Arbiter Council has been negotiating with them for months, trying to prevent another galactic war, you know. They think peace is still possible, but that can be reasoned with." Philip scoffed. "And you believe that?" Marcus shook his head, his expression grim. "No, I've been trying to warn them that they have no interest in peace. They've been preparing for something big, gathering resources, building up their fleet. The council wouldn't listen, but I dug deeper on my own. That's when I found out about the weapon." Everyone in the room froze. Ichiro, standing near the door with his arms crossed, narrowed his eyes. "Weapon." Marcus nodded. "I don't know all the details, but it's massive. Something that can disrupt entire planetary systems. They call it the Sundering Pulse. It's still in the testing phase, but once it's ready, they'll use it to wipe out their enemies. And the Arbiters, they'll be first." The room fell into a tense silence as Marcus's words sank in. They weren't just preparing for war, they were planning to unleash a weapon that could tip the balance of power across the galaxy. It was worse than any of them had anticipated. Broke the silence, her voice hard. "So, what's the plan? We can't just sit on this information." "We won't," Ichiro said firmly, his eyes locked on Marcus. "But we need proof, something we can take to the Arbiters or other factions. If we just go in with a story, no one will listen." Marcus grimaced. "I had the proof, that's why they took me. I managed to get into one of the Leon's encrypted archives and download schematics, communications logs, everything. But they caught me before I could transmit it." "Where's the data now?" Philip asked, tension rising in his chest. "It's still on the orbiter station," Marcus said, his voice heavy with regret. "In a hidden terminal in my quarters. They didn't know I had it, but I couldn't retrieve it before you got me out." Alara let out a low whistle. "So, we're going back." "We have no choice," Ichiro said, his expression unreadable. "If we don't get that data, the Lions will move forward with their plans, and we'll be fighting blind." Philip nodded, his resolve hardening. "We go back, but this time we do it right. We get the data, and we stop them." Hours later, the Majestic 12 hung in the shadow of a distant asteroid field, well beyond the orbiter station's sensors. The crew gathered around the holographic display in the command center, reviewing the layout of the station and planning their next move. "Stealth mode only gives us 10 minutes again," Jack reminded them, pulling up the schematics of the station's internal layout. "We'll have to be in and out fast." "This time we'll split into 2 teams," Ichiro said, his voice steady as he outlined the plan. "Alara and I will secure the perimeter and provide backup if things go south. Philip and Marcus will go straight for the terminal and retrieve the data. Grace and Jack, you'll stay here and keep the ship ready for a quick extraction." Alara smirked, checking the charge on her plasma blades. "Round 2, I'm game." Philip glanced at his brother, who had swapped his formal attire for more practical combat gear. Marcus was still recovering from his injuries, but his eyes were clear and focused. He'd always been a man of intellect, of strategy. Philip had been the soldier, the one who charged into the fire. But now they were in this together, and for the first time in years, they were united by the same mission. "You sure you're up for this?" Philip asked quietly as they suited up. Marcus gave a small, tight smile. "I spent years trying to avoid getting my hands dirty. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending that diplomacy is enough." Philip nodded, understanding the weight behind his brother's words. This was more than just a rescue mission. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the reality that the galaxy was teetering on the edge of destruction, and they were the only ones who could stop it. Hours later, the Majestic 12 hung in the shadow of a distant asteroid field, well beyond the orbiter station's sensors. The crew gathered around the holographic display in the command center, reviewing the layout of the station and planning their next move. "Stealth mode only gives us 10 minutes again," Jack reminded them, pulling up the schematics of the station's internal layout. "We'll have to be in and out fast." "This time we'll split into 2 teams," Ichiro said, his voice steady as he outlined the plan. "Alara and I will secure the perimeter and provide backup if things go south. Philip and Marcus will go straight for the terminal and retrieve the data. Grace and Jack, you'll stay here and keep the ship ready for a quick extraction." Alara smirked, checking the charge on her plasma blades. "Round 2, I'm game." Philip glanced at his brother, who had swapped his formal attire for more practical combat gear. Marcus was still recovering from his injuries, but his eyes were clear and focused. He'd always been a man of intellect, of strategy. Philip had been the soldier, the one who charged into the fire. But now, they were in this together, and for the first time in years, they were united by the same mission. "You sure you're up for this?" Philip asked quietly as they suited up. Marcus gave a small, tight smile. "I spent years trying to avoid getting my hands dirty. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending that diplomacy is enough." Philip nodded, understanding the weight behind his brother's words. This was more than just a rescue mission. It was a reckoning, a confrontation with the reality that the galaxy was teetering on the edge of destruction, and they were the only ones who could stop it. The Majestic 12 drifted silently toward the orbiter station, its stealth systems engaged as it approached the maintenance hatch they had used before. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized, each step bringing them closer to the heart of the station and the hidden data that could change the course of the galaxy. Once again, the airlock hissed open, and they slipped inside the station's corridors, their footsteps muffled by the thick metal floors. The station was quieter than before, no Leyan soldiers in sight, but that didn't mean they weren't there. "Stay sharp," Ichiro whispered through the comms. "We're not alone." Philip and Marcus led the way, navigating through the winding corridors toward Marcus's quarters. Every shadow seemed to move, every sound echoed louder in the tense silence. They moved quickly, their senses heightened by the danger around them. Finally, they reached the door to Marcus's quarters. He quickly entered the access code, and the door slid open with a soft hiss. The room was just as he had left it, the simple furnishings and sparse decor a stark contrast to the chaos outside. "The terminal's here," Marcus said, moving to a concealed panel in the wall. He pressed a hidden switch, and the panel slid open, revealing a sleek, secure terminal embedded in the wall. "I hid the data in an encrypted partition. It'll take a minute to extract it." Philip stood guard by the door, his weapon ready as Marcus began working on the terminal. The seconds stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity as the tension in the air thickened. "Got it," Marcus said finally, pulling a data crystal from the terminal. "We have everything we need." Just as he spoke, the station's alarms blared to life. "Intruders detected," the voice of the station's eye echoed through the halls. "Lockdown initiated." Philip swore under his breath. "We're out of time." "We have to move," Marcus urged, shoving the data crystal into a pouch on his belt. "Alara, Ichiro," Philip barked into his comm. "We've got the data, but the station's on lockdown." "Copy that," Ichiro replied, his voice calm. "We're heading to the extraction point now. Get there as fast as you can." Philip and Marcus sprinted through the station's corridors, the alarms blaring around them. Behind them, they could hear the heavy footfalls of Lion soldiers, their weapons drawn, closing in fast. "We need to get to the airlock," Philip said, his breath coming in short bursts as they rounded a corner. Marcus nodded, pushing himself harder. "I'm right behind you." They raced through the station, their hearts pounding in their chests, the sound of approaching soldiers growing louder. Philip fired a few shots behind him, trying to slow their pursuers, but there were too many of them. They had to keep moving. Finally, they reached the airlock, where Alara and Ichiro were waiting, their weapons drawn. "About time," Alara called, firing a shot at the approaching Lions. "Get on board now." They scrambled up the boarding ramp just as the Lions rounded the corner. Plasma bolts whizzed past them as the airlock sealed shut behind them. "Jack, we're on board," Ichiro shouted. "Get us out of here." The Majestic 12 roared to life, its engines flaring as it shot away from the station, narrowly avoiding the Lion ships that scrambled to give chase. The crew strapped in, their faces tense, but focused as the ship hurtled through space. "We've got the data," Philip said, leaning back in his seat, his heart still racing. "Now what?" Ichiro glanced at the display, where the stars blurred as they entered hyperspace. "Now we take this to the ones who will listen, and then we stop them." Philip nodded, but in the back of his mind, a darker thought lingered. The Lions had been preparing for war for years, and their plans were far more advanced than anyone had realized. Stopping them would be harder than any of them imagined.